person. And I don't think
Yes.
that when AOC says that she's going to vote for Biden no matter what, I think that's fucking terrible. I think that's really like such a terrible thing to say, because the only power that you have as a voter is your vote, right? And if the person knows that you're going to vote for them, why would they ever try to help you? They know that they've got your vote. They're going to try and help the people whose votes they don't have. So when you ran as a progressive AOC, and you've got all of these progressive fans and people who look up to you, and you're telling them all to vote for Biden, even though he's not going to give you health care, he's not going to help with the Green New Deal, he's not going to help with lower cost of education, he's not going to help with any of these things. You're really just screwing progressives, and it just feels like so gross. Like all of
Yeah.
this just feels gross. Like this Daily Brief guy and people like AOC, in the way that they talk to voters, it's just so condescending.
It is,
Like,
and two points to what you said. The first thing you said was that, like, I think to further on that point, we both agree on the fact that you don't vote for another party just because you hate the other party. And secondly,
hmm,
um, again, if you're the Democrats, we mentioned this before, but the Democrats are using hate against, and I'll say it, Trump can be hateful at times. He can say some pretty nasty but funny stuff, And if the Dems hate that about Trump, you can't use that against him. You know what I mean? Like you should not use that against him if you
yeah,
hate it, right?
yeah,
Because it just gives him more power over you too. Because you're saying, look, what you're doing is actually working against us, so we're gonna have to do it to you. So I don't care if you're a Democrat and you want to use hate. If you want to say Trump is an orange man, he's got small hands, whatever, blah blah blah, do it. But don't also act like you're some sort of savior for the Democratic Party by saying I'm the best person. I it's love, peace, everything, and then you hate on Trump. You can't do it. You got to pick a side,
100%.
right?
A
The other
hundred
thing is
percent.
that with the Biden, your point on Biden being voted in because just because they hate the other side, that's how a lot of dictatorships kind of get in place, right? Like you look at Egypt, the Muslim Brotherhood was, arguably a bad thing. Like we won't get into that whole whether it was good or bad. And then they now have El Sisi, who is pretty much a dictator. Trump actually said he went up to El Sisi. You ever heard of that? Where he met the guy and said, "Who? There's my." He said like, "There's my favorite dictator," to his face,
No, I
even though he's
haven't.
not technically a dictator.
Mhm,
Um,
mhm.
but they
That's
voted him in
hilarious.
thinking he was better, right? And it turns
Mhm.
out that no, you can't just vote in someone random because he's also very corrupt. So yeah,
Yeah.
valid points.
So I just sent you a link on Facebook. Uh, I'd be interested for you to bring that up and play it, because I think it really sort of underscores my point as to why AOC should not be saying this type of stuff to a voting base.
Let's see if I can get it here.
If you want to pull the party, the major party that is closest to the way you're thinking, to what you're thinking, you must show them that you're capable of not voting for them.
Because the way the Democratic Party is run now for quite a number of presidential cycles is they pick a nominee in a kind of half-assed process that doesn't really represent much of anybody, and then they tell everybody to just shut up. Don't bring up anything that will complicate life for your nominee. You know he's not for you on this. Why badger him? He's not going to be for you for reasons that you don't understand but are good reasons. Shut up. Turn off your brains.
If you don't show them you're capable of not voting for them, they don't have to listen to you. I promise you that. I worked within the Democratic Party. I didn't listen or have to listen to anything on the left while I was working in the Democratic Party, because the left had nowhere to go.
Wow, that's interesting how you put. Yeah, that's a good video. I like that video.
If you want
It's I think that it's hilarious that he is a mainstream media left-wing journalist now and would never, ever, 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 ever say any of those things again.
Really,
But,
he's back in the he's back on the dark side.
well, he's
Oh,
not a
2006
politician.
documentary about.
Well, he's not a politician anymore. He's just a journalist now. So now it's like when you're a left-wing journalist, it's like once again you have to say all the left-wing things. But his point in that video is spot on, and it's exactly why AOC should not be saying that to people, because you're essentially telling your voters, or you're telling Joe Biden, you don't need to give a fuck about progressives. You don't need to give a shit about about any of the stuff that we care about, because we have nowhere to go. We're not going to vote for Trump.
Yeah.
And we're definitely going to vote for Biden. We're, vote blue no matter who, and all that bullshit that comes out. And this is why I personally believe that Trump's going to win again, is because the progressives aren't going to turn up for Joe Biden. No matter how much AOC shames them into doing it, they're never going to be like, oh, yeah, let's go for the corporatist, warmongering, jail building, crime bill writing, fucking Joe Biden, dementia-addled, fucking, I don't see a progressive that actually cares about progressive things. Rather, fake progressives will vote for Joe Biden, but I don't think any real progressive will.
Yeah, and if they do, like you said, they're not going to get what. They'll just be just.
They're not going to get what they
unhappy.
want. Exactly. Yeah.
And that's just kicking the rock. That's just kicking the stone down the street. Like you're gonna have, you're gonna have a backlash to that. Let's say Biden gets in, and he's in for 4, 8 years, whatever, and Kamala maybe dies, and Kamala Harris becomes the president. And if people don't like that, you're gonna get another Trump, maybe an even worse Trump, and it.
Way worse.
You know.
Way worse. Well, this is for me one of the big reasons why I actually think that Trump is I don't like either of the candidates. If I was American, I would be voting for Joe Jorgensen, the Libertarian candidate. But with that being said, if I only had the options of Biden or Trump, I actually think that Trump is the lesser of two evils when you play this thing out over a long term. Because if you go back to the norm, if you go back to the status quo, that was exactly why Trump got elected. People were so upset at the class-based system that had happened, where they were just getting fucked, where they'd been kicked out of their homes while the banks all got huge bailouts, when Obamacare did nothing to help these people. The Flint fucking water crisis is ridiculous. There's just constant bad things happening for poor people. There are tons of disenfranchised voters, and then when some charismatic guy comes along and basically says, hey, fuck all these politicians, I've got the answer, people are desperate and they want to go with him. And so what happens when a more charismatic, more intelligent, more evil person tries to then do the same thing in 10 or 20 years after Biden gets elected and everything goes back to the way it was? Because it wasn't good. It wasn't good 10 years ago. It wasn't good it's not good now. Being poor in America is a fucking terrible circumstance to be in. It's not good.
10 years ago, 12 years ago, we had that whole financial crisis, which was arguably Bill Clinton had some involvement in that. So no, it's not. No party's ever been, basically all the party. You could have a much better party in this day and age than any of the parties that have ever existed. And all you've got to do is have the people do some critical thinking, research your stuff, and don't let yourself be shamed. That's it. Don't be shamed into voting.
Don't be shamed into voting for someone, and go out and vote for the person that best represents your ideals. And that might mean not voting for either of the two major parties. It probably does mean not voting for two of the major parties. Unless you're a huge corporation, voting for either of the two major parties is not really a good idea.
Yeah.
The problem is that these, and I think I sent you a clip on this, you might be able to bring it up, it was from Spike Cohen. It's one of the later ones that I sent you. But the problem is that these other parties, the People's Party, the Greens Party, the Libertarians, they're not allowed to speak on the debate stage. We're about to see 4 debates of Trump and Biden with no other parties on stage. The VPs, once again, there's going to be no other parties on stage. It's ridiculous. If that happened in Canada, we would all go crazy. I love seeing Bloc Quebec on the debate stage because they're crazy people. Like they're super hardline right-wing people that I don't understand or agree with at all. But I like seeing their representation up there. I also love seeing the Greens on the debate stage in Canada.
So
But
so Spike Cohen is Joe Jorgensen's
VP, yeah,
vice president. Okay, interesting.
yeah,
Joe
and
Jorgensen and
they
I on the ballot in all 50 states. They didn't receive 15% and yeah. So
yeah they
he's
didn't they
saying
didn't allow for polls and then told them that they didn't qualify for the polls.
that's
And then
pretty upsetting.
And
Like,
I'm sure that if you do a real quick Google search as well, you can find some articles talking about how the Democrats just got the Greens off a bunch of ballots in the swing states. So literally suppressing votes because they don't want people to vote Greens. They want them to vote Democrat instead, and they don't want to lose any votes to the Greens party. But what you're doing there is
because of
you're
Jill Stein.
right.
I forgot about that. Jill Stein was. I remember that. That was funny when she
But that's
took votes